They say life is what you make it. So what happens if you actually try? What if you actually tried to get your mind right? What if you actually tried to live the high life? What if you happen to die cause life is finite? What if you actually tried to live your best day ever? What if you actually tried to get your mind right? What if you actually tried to live the high life? What if you happen to die cause life is finite? What if you actually tried to live your best day ever? What if you actually grind out when the time's right? What if you actually blinded by your hindsight? What if you actually find out what defines life? What if you actually tried to live your best day ever? I'm getting 1% better every day. I'm getting 1% better every way. I'm waking up every day to a sunny day. No matter what the weather say, life is like a record, so just let it play.
Hello, everyone, and welcome back to episode number 5 of BDE Media. That stands for Best Day Ever, and really excited to jump into it. Quick reminder, if you guys are new here, we kind of do a 2-part show every single weekday. The first part is covering the news over the last 24 hours, so we'll get into that in a second. And the second half is kind of a deep dive or a tangent into different subject matters. Today is kind of Hangout Friday, so we're going to be talking everything movies, our favorite movies, our favorite movie experiences and things like that. But before we get into it, let's check in. How are you doing, Adam?
Yeah, I'm excellent, Matt. I'm riding an absolute high from seeing Bill Burr last night live in concert at Windsor's Coliseum, Caesar's Coliseum there. And it was an absolute banger of a show. And I know we were just talking about culture jamming on a recent episode. And let's just say I think comedians are one of the best at conveying, unique ideas in sort of interesting ways that you don't expect or don't see coming. And Bill Burr is an absolute master of his craft. So I'm riding an absolute high from that.
Nice. Love to hear it. Yeah. And for anyone that missed that episode, that was Wednesday's deep dive. And one of the last things I think we touched upon in that talk is how comedians essentially are the modern day court jester, right? And at face value, that maybe doesn't sound that insightful, but understand the real purpose of the court jester was not only to, be funny or humorous, but they were often the only individual that actually could call out the king in his own court. Not only did that act as like a pressure valve release, but it also sometimes allowed the court jester or the comedian to shine light on a subject matter that a lot of people maybe, under the surface level feel or believe, but they're not in a position of power or they're too afraid in order to really speak out or call it out. So I really do believe that comedians, particularly in this modern era of cancel culture and the woke narrative and, all that jazz, are so valuable, right? Particularly those that are willing to call out and speak out and, admit, hey, I don't think the emperor's wearing any clothes right now. All right. Well, the first story I want to share with you guys, this is not quite so humorous, but I think it is really important for us to cover. And I do find it fairly fascinating. So let's just jump into it. If you guys missed it, there's a lot of controversy over Ukraine's prime minister and what he recently said in a statement. So Zelensky came out yesterday talking about preemptive action or a preemptive strike, depending upon your interpretation of his exact words. Now, obviously, I don't speak Ukrainian. I suspect you don't either, Adam.
No, but I do live with a Ukrainian, so if we do need a translation, I can pull it up for us.
You should at some point get her to listen to his original talk, because I would love to hear how she would personally interpret it. We don't need to do it on the show necessarily, but I do think it's fascinating. So originally when this story broke, a lot of, counter media or independent journalists were saying that Zelensky was calling for a preventative strike against Russia before they could make a nuclear strike. Now, obviously, if you were to hear that, that sounds very aggressive in its tonality. I've got this story from Politico, though. Politico came out and said that this is a misinterpretation. So Ukraine says Zelensky's preventative strike call misinterpreted as Moscow fumes. So Kiev says president was referring to economic sanctions, while Russian officials accuse him of calling to start a world war. Now, there was also a bunch of doctored videos that were misrepresenting Zelensky. And so, again, I find that very frustrating because it's hard enough to understand the truth, even when you're faced with facts, let alone when people are doctoring videos. So, for anyone out there, I know even one of our favorite political pundits and comedians, Adam, Dave Smith, he fell victim to this and he ended up actually sharing it. He took down that video and later put out a tweet apologizing for it. But again, even just looking at the pure facts here, it at a minimum, this is interesting the way this is all coming to light because I guess haven't we already implemented a lot of economic sanctions against Russia? I'm pretty sure that that's what I've been hearing about for like the last 6 months, right? Whether it's them being kicked from the SWIFT payment system, whether it's, Europe no longer wanting to transact with them in order to get their energy and fuel, right? Or whether we're talking about, Russian plutocrats having their, $1 million or tens of millions of dollar yachts seized and things of that nature. So, it's just, I guess at a minimum, I would like to hear Zelensky or someone from Kiev or his political party really explain to us what additional economic sanctions is he calling for here in this preemptive strike or this preemptive approach to trying to implement additional economic sanctions. Because what else at this point in time are you really looking for? And do you really believe that that somehow is going to cause Russia to back away? I feel like both sides, from an outsider looking in, seem very entrenched into all this. But any thoughts here, Adam?
Yeah, there's a couple sanctions that you missed, including blowing up their Nord Stream 2 or whatever. But there's also
arguably we don't know definitively like who's done that, but certainly it would appear that there's more motives for someone on the pro-Ukraine side versus the pro-Russia side. But again, like in this era of like false flag operations, I'm willing to admit anything's possible. And sadly, I don't think we're ever going to get to the bottom of it, or it'll be decades until we're able to.
Yeah, completely agree. And, it seems like maybe one of the editors for the Toronto Star is now planning Zelensky's speeches if they're this open to misinterpretations. So if you guys don't know what I'm talking about, go listen to yesterday's episode where we looked at a Toronto Star headline that essentially was, punishing or at least pitting against the unvaccinated and claiming that they should just die. And it's like, well, if you're not going to be clear with your communication, if you're not going to actually say what you mean, then we have to interpret your statements however we wish, right? And so, the concept of a preemptive strike, whether that has to do with economics or with the military action, this is not the type of announcement that should be left to interpretation, right? Because, this is classic Spielberg, right? If you want to really terrify people, show the shark for only moments of the movie, right? And use smoke and mirrors to really inspire fear. And I think that, any type of move like this, that's the only outcome. It's going to inspire fear because our minds are going to do the work for us instead of him actually just telling us what he actually meant to say.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, absolutely agree. And one other little story I kind of want to touch upon here before we necessarily jump into the, you know what, we'll hold that for a second. So again, just wanted to kind of give a quick update on the whole Ukraine Zelensky situation. The next little quick update I want to share with you guys, and Adam, I know you kind of had a hectic morning, so I'm not expecting you necessarily had the opportunity to do a deep dive into our show notes. So I'm just going to ask you, have you ever heard of the hashtag, and I hope I get this right, but the hashtag MGTOW?
Absolutely not.
All right. Well, it turns out this is a smoking gun that proves that Pierre Poilievre is a misogynist. So anyone that's not familiar with it, this hashtag MG, again, let me get this right, MGTOW stands for Men Going Their Own Way. I'd kind of stumbled upon this movement in the past. At the same time, I never did a deep dive into it. I've looked a little bit more because it's jumped into the Canadian political narrative so much over the last 24 hours. I believe originally Global News came out with this, and it felt like, at least on Twitter, some of their reporters were framing this as the smoking gun that proved that Pierre Poilievre was a misogynist because he used this hashtag in multiple YouTube videos he's posted. Now, for anyone that's unfamiliar with Men Going Their Own Way, one, I don't blame you. Two, let's explore it a little bit. So I think it can be, relatively fairly described as the idea of men going their own way. Oftentimes it will be framed as an anti-feminist movement. Now, What you'll often see, though, from mainstream media when they're exploring this subject matter is not only are they going to frame it as men going their own way and anti-feminist, but they immediately add on additional characteristics to the movement. So they'll also say it's misogynist. Now, there definitely are misogynists in this group and movement, but I don't think it's necessarily fair to say every single individual associated with this idea or concept is inherently misogynist, right? Because as we explored earlier on in the week in one of our news shows, misogynist is someone that like actively hates women, right? And this is what frustrates me so much about the political discourse these days is oftentimes we'll find individuals that will take one term that probably is applicable and then immediately add on a bunch of additional frames to that, right? So something that I believe like Justin Trudeau is famous for at this moment in time is saying that someone's like, anti-vaccine passports, and then he'll say that they're also misogynist, they're also racist, they also have unacceptable views. Now, I am anti-vaccine passports, straight up. I'm not going to argue that whatsoever. But I would argue that I'm none of those other descriptors. And I kind of find myself feeling very similar about this hashtag. Now, what is interesting to me and what I actually want to give Pierre Poilievre some props for is he owned up to the fact that, like, yeah, we probably shouldn't have used that hashtag. The moment we became aware of it, we took it down. And I think Brian Lilly here probably gave one of the fairest opinions on this subject matter. So Poilievre gives Trudeau something he wasn't expecting, a fight. And let's just kind of run through this quick here, guys. On Thursday, Justin Trudeau tried to turn the tables on Conservative leader Pierre Poilievre and started asking him questions. The Conservative leader has been purposefully using his videos to appeal to far-right misogynists online. Anti-women, they have devastating real-life consequences. Mr. Speaker, I call on the Conservative leader to stand in this House, take responsibility, and apologize, Trudeau said. I'm not, and this is Brian's perspective here, I'm not sure he was expecting Poilievre's response. I took responsibility and corrected as soon as it became known to me, Poilievre said. And this actually just feels like a relatively honest owning of a mistake here, which is refreshing political discourse in the first place. However, again, I'm so frustrated that immediately this is used to frame everything as Pierre Poilievre bad. And Justin Trudeau continued to push the subject matter. And then Pierre brought up this in regards to Justin Trudeau specifically. He funded a vicious anti-Semite to spread hatred online with taxpayer dollars. He repeatedly, in fact, so many times he can't even keep track, dressed up in racist costumes for which he has not ever come fully to account. And he drove many women on his own caucus out of the party and out of parliament altogether with his mistreatment of them, Poilievre said. We condemn all that behavior. We condemn misogyny always and everywhere. And we ask the prime minister to finally do the same. And so I think this was interesting because it really did turn the narrative, at least from my perspective, against Justin Trudeau rather than getting Justin Trudeau the political points he wanted. However, don't get me wrong, if you read global news, you will not come to the same conclusion as we're going to come to here via the Canoe, which was the Toronto Sun. But one thing I want to highlight is just because you use a hashtag, I don't believe it inherently makes you misogynist, right? I think that the same way that people will often point to someone being racist when what they really mean is like, hey, that person may have in-group and out-group preferences. And that's a whole different ball of wax to explore. And it's a much more nuanced conversation than simply like orange man bad or Poilievre racist, misogynist, and every other bad word I can think of in regards to him. And I agree, Poilievre is not a misogynist, or at least if he is, we haven't seen the proof of it yet. And certainly a handful of hashtags being used on YouTube videos, which like, if you believe that Pierre's the one uploading these videos and choosing the hashtags that is being applied to his videos, that just seems so insincere, right? Like that seems like a bad faith actor position in regards to the argument there. So any real quick hot takes here, Adam? Does using a hashtag make you inherently misogynist?
No, I don't think so, especially when, we can consider the fact that like any given hashtag, if it's trending or something, is likely going to get the video more attention. And so whoever's posting these videos is likely trying to grab as much attention to spread whatever message is in the actual video. I highly doubt he's a misogynist. I've actually had the pleasure of meeting him in person, with my girlfriend, and he treated all the women in that room very fairly. Gave them equal time.
You right there, Adam?
Sure.
Based upon my understanding of the political discourse these days, you met with a misogynist, so therefore you're a misogynist.
Oh, damn it! This happens every time. This is why I don't leave the house.
Exactly. And now let's kind of transition into our WTF story of the day. I've actually got two here, and both of them are doozies, in my opinion. I kind of hope you haven't had a chance yet to look at them, Adam, because again, I think that this just makes the framing even more fun. But, you know, what's your hot take if someone believes that America or any country should have manufacturing in their own country?
Uh, yeah, okay. So I do have a degree in international business management, which means I had to take some economics courses. There are issues associated with comparative and competitive and absolute advantages when it comes to manufacturing. However, I do think we live in a very strange time where just-in-time inventory and the supply chains on a globalization scale are very fragile. I mean, they suffer from all sorts of things like natural catastrophes, viruses, God forbid, not that that would ever happen. But things can very much interrupt a just-in-time system, and there's not a lot of redundancy built into that system. So somebody wanting to have manufacturing be domestic, I can really understand that, especially when it comes to things like medical supplies, like, certain drugs that are very popular, chips, right? Those little, what were they, Matt? Those chips that really interrupted the automotive industry this year.
Like microchips?
Yeah, I think it was just like micro. No,
Yeah.
but like there's a specific chip, but they, when those supply chains get interrupted, I mean, you have nothing. They're in everything, right? So
Mm-hmm.
I can understand the position where you're like, yeah, we should probably have some domestic manufacturing.
Yeah, and obviously, at the middle of the 20th century, we saw a huge rise and boom in American manufacturing, right? And for simplicity's sake, in this case, America and Canada are the same thing in this discussion. So again, we saw a huge boom, and then coming into the 70s and 80s, we started to see a gutting of that, right? And continuing on into the 21st century to the point now where regularly like Middle America or the Mid East and Midwest is referred to as like the Rust Belt, right? So when we're thinking of areas like Ohio, Michigan, you know, those different sort of states, and again, like even in Canada, like where you just visited, Windsor, the very manufacturing heavy, like city that depended upon that industry. However, this just came out yesterday, and this is from a speaker at the Cato Institute. And while this individual doesn't speak for the Cato Institute, it's very telling how quickly individuals have capitulated to the woke mentality. And I'm going to play a video clip here for you guys, but I want to highlight what he says first. So understand, if you believe in domestic manufacturing, you actually have a fetish for keeping white males with low education and powerful positions that they are in. So again, fetish for keeping white males with low education and powerful positions they are in if you believe in domestic manufacturing. And don't take my word for it. Let's literally hear this individual's, and hopefully this works.
I'm sure I'm going to piss off both left and right, so I apologize. That the fetish for manufacturing is part of the general fetish for keeping white males of low education outside the cities in the powerful positions they're in the U.S. And that is really what's going on here. Because when you look at the costs of manufacturing, and Susan Hausman and her co-authors have done a lot, not of manufacturing, of trade, and job displacement and community. Susan Hausman and her co-authors have done a lot of work on this, and I'm sure she'll have a different view than I do.
So I'll leave you guys to go on your own little due diligence here and dive deeper into the context of this clip. But it's hard for me not to want to take what he's saying here at face value. And it honestly, like, they hate you. Like, they being these elites, like this economist that's probably never worked in a factory, that's never seen the damage that's been done to middle America. However, one thing I want to highlight here is an individual in this thread actually fact checked it. And it turns out that's not even factually true. That when we look at wage disparity, the gutting of manufacturing in America actually disproportionately impacted urban blacks versus suburban whites. So again, even this narrative's wrong, but the fact that essentially he's just like, well, you're a racist, right? You've got a fetish for white people if you're going to dare want to see domestic manufacturing and not explore the nuances whatsoever. I just find this so frustrating, and yet it also feels very typical for the time and era we live in. And I think that we need to see more people pushing back and really calling to task these individuals. Like, it blows my mind that this somehow plays into, low education white males being put in positions of power if you want domestic manufacturing. It actually is just good in general for your local economy if, as you mentioned earlier, Adam, you're able to competitively manufacture domestically. There should be nothing wrong with that. And the fact that he chooses to frame it in that manner, again, just honestly blows my mind. But another story here that blows my mind is this video. And I don't know. Maybe I just follow the wrong people on Twitter because I see these sort of videos of police abuse all the time. But this one really took the cake, in my opinion, at least based upon the recent videos I've seen. And right now, there's no sound, but there will be sound in a second.
Get out of the car. Shots fired! Shots fired! Shots fired!
So I'm going to leave it there. That essentially covers everything I want to show in that video clip. Now, obviously, the person the cop shot must be a mass murderer, right? Like, he must have been a criminal that was fleeing an immediate and dangerous situation. Except for he wasn't. This was a dude in a random parking lot eating his burger when some person just walks up, opens the door, and says, "Turn off the car." Now, he probably shouldn't have tried to escape the cop in that moment in time, but without any additional context, I would probably panic too. Like, if some dude opened my door and was pointing a gun at me, I might not even spend the time to look to see that he's a police officer, particularly when he hasn't identified himself as a police officer. Now, it turns out this individual had done absolutely nothing wrong. In fact, the details behind this, for anyone that's curious, the cop thought the car was the same one that evaded him the night before, but it wasn't. Like, this to me just shows how broken our policing system is. Like, this is such an abuse of power that honestly it boggles my mind. And when I first watched it, I found myself speechless. But a few other points I want to highlight here that the Libertarian Party of Delaware made in their Twitter thread was, love the number of people who will simultaneously criticize the untrained average dude for getting scared and driving off while also defending the trained officer for getting scared and shooting him. Big brain moment. You stay classy, bootlickers. And that honestly encapsulates my opinion here. Like, if I was just like, I don't know, in my mind, like, if I'm in a parking lot of a fast food place eating my burger, I'm kind of shame eating, right? Like, I'm probably like, I'm not really loving myself at that moment in time. And some dude opens my door unannounced, like, without framing it correctly, and tells me to turn off my car. I can understand jumping into a panic, right? Just trying to de-escalate the situation by escaping it. And yet, for the cop to immediately shoot him when he's no immediate harm, like, he's no immediate threat, right? Simply, he was driving the wrong car in the wrong neighborhood the night after the police had been evaded. Anything you want to share here in regards to that video, Adam?
Yeah, I mean, that was disgusting. I do think that we are at risk of having a certain bias with the content that makes it to the internet. Like, obviously, we're not going to be posting the millions of positive interactions that happen with the police, but that video was obviously disgusting. I mean, unprovoked, shooting a human being, like, the level, the duty of care that needs to go into making that decision should be so high. I mean, the amount of evidence and risk that must be associated before you pull that trigger should have to come with a very, very, very steep onus on the cop, right? Who is, to their point, trained for these situations. And if they're untrained or if they're not of sound mind, they shouldn't be operating, because obviously, I mean, that's life and death, like, literally. And I don't know if you've watched many videos before, Matt, but aluminum is not a bulletproof substance. Those shots he was breaking off at the car as it was driving away, most of those would go through that aluminum, and the beams in the car kind of deflect some of the bullet and where it goes, but more than likely he's getting at the very minimum shrapnel from those shots. So not good.
Yeah, like, and from my perspective, I do not see an immediate danger or threat that need to be neutralized based upon lethal force. Like, just straight up.
Almost all these videos, there's no present threat. And again, I think we need to be a bit cautious because we're clearly not seeing all of the positive interactions on the internet. It's just not post worthy. It's kind of the nature of social media. But But a lot of these videos, there's a thread, right? There's a theme that runs through them, and that's, no present danger or no apparent danger. Like maybe somebody has a weapon or an improvised weapon that they could potentially harm somebody with, and then the cop elects to shoot them with very real bullets, right? Moving at thousands of feet per second, and that's just different, right? And so, I don't think he was about to be clobbered to death by that Big Mac in that video. So, obviously jarring, very disgusting in my opinion.
Yeah, and I just want to highlight, I love this quote, and I believe it's from the English jurist William Blackstone, but it is better that 10 guilty persons escape than one innocent suffer. And I honestly do believe that we need to grade on that curve. So while the fact that there probably is tons of pleasant interactions with police, the burden of proof always has to be on police for a multitude of reasons. But one, they're supposed to be trained professionals, right? Like just straight up. And it's very clear that there's a lack of adequate training when it comes to police enforcers, right? And I don't think it's something particularly unique just to the United States or just to a couple of these edge cases that get shared on social media. And I would much rather see, even if that person was a threat to society, but not an immediate dangerous threat, that he evade that versus the cop just popping off and shooting wildly at him.
Absolutely. And I think Jocko Willink, former Navy SEAL commander, I think he has one of the best takes on this that I've ever heard, which is that he believes every police officer should have at minimum a purple belt in jiu-jitsu. And a purple belt in jiu-jitsu would give you a extreme knowledge of the workings and mechanics of the human body and use of force. And in that way, I think we could prevent actually a tremendous number of these types of incidents where obviously the cop is afraid. I mean, this is a response that you have out of fear, obviously, in my opinion, fear or hatred. But I can't see a reason for that type of hatred in that circumstance. But if for that type of fear to occur, it's because of some sort of inadequacy. You're afraid that you're about to be harmed, hurt, killed, injured, and so you make that decision to pull the trigger. I think I'm with Jocko on this. If people had a really good understanding of how to defend themselves, how to manipulate the human body, and use force safely, I don't think we would have this many incidents that are, potentially going to cause the loss of life for no good reason.
Mm-hmm. And from my perspective, not a trained law enforcement officer, don't claim to be one, but it seems like there's a lot of different ways this could have been approached, right? If the officer was in a squad car, why not pull up behind the individual, block them into that parking space with your lights on, right? That would, in my opinion, de-escalate the situation because it would provide additional context to the individual, at least, right? Like it would be obvious there was a police officer that was about to open my door. And
Matt,
then,
have you heard? Sorry, I don't want to take us way too far into the weeds, but are you aware of these no knock warrants?
yes,
So they
yes,
have
they've been
no,
around for a long time, and there's honestly so much violence comes from these no-knock
dude.
warrants. And again, oftentimes, not oftentimes, but there appears to be more than a significant level of edge case scenarios or anecdotal evidence where police end up going after the wrong household, and someone gets their door
Yeah,
knocked in, they grab their gun because they're like, "What the hell's happening?" Oftentimes, this is happening, and relatively high crime neighborhoods. And so I understand why an individual on a no knock raid would jump to conclusions that maybe they're not being
absolutely.
raided by the police, but they're actually being raided by criminals, in which case I feel like you should. And I don't care what your state laws are, but I feel like you should have the right to defend yourself if someone bursts into your home unannounced.
Yeah, I 100% agree. And one of the things, and again, I don't want to go too far into the weeds here, but I am a little bit perturbed as well about Canada's laws regarding this, right? We don't have the same kind of castle laws that the United States has, where if you were to assault somebody, it would be assault, actually, if you were to cause bodily harm or any type of harm to somebody breaking into your own home. And I think there's a whole conversation to be had around that. But yeah, I think that you're bang on here. Lights, presence, announcement, right? All of these things are going to probably de-escalate a
It,
situation or provide much more context to the person that's going to choose to escalate, at which point the officer should be well trained in order to deal with that escalation, right?
Yeah, and if the officer honestly felt that this person was a significant threat to society, well, right now the person wasn't trying to evade the cop, right? Why not call for backup, get helicopters, get 1,000 squad cars if necessary, and encircle the individual while they're eating their burger in the parking lot, versus like deciding to essentially be John Wayne and approach it yourself. But anyways, we've got other stories to cover, and I want to make sure we get into them before we eat up our entire hour here. But let's continue on the trend of Matt being angry at police, because I see no reason to get off this train quite yet. So the next story I want to share with you guys, and this one's a doozy. If you haven't been paying attention to what's going on in the UK in regards to some of their speech laws and anti-hate laws, understand that this is coming to a Canada near you very soon, in my humble opinion. So UK mother of 5 arrested for offensive online posts. A mother of 5 in the UK is making headlines after police arrested her in front of her children and apparently seized her computer following alleged offensive online posts concerning transgender issues. So I want to describe exactly how she frames this, because if this is true, this to me tells me all I need to know to be against these sort of laws. This isn't the only one either. There's been lots of videos going viral on kind of libertarian Twitter about essentially the police becoming the speech police. And it frustrates me to no end that, like, if I let myself go down, I'll truly become speechless. But this is from the mother herself, Caroline Farrow. Well, actually, they came to the door and said, "There's been an allegation. Can we come in?" I said, "Do you have a warrant?" They said, "We don't need one." And the 6'3" bloke forced his way in. They seized all my devices, including my work Chromebook and the homework iPad, which will upset the 10-year-old with autism even more because all her Harry Potter audiobooks are stored on there. And now she can't do homeschooling. It's scary that the police can take someone's word for something and just come in and arrest you. All they could say is, "We've had an allegation which needs to be investigated." To be clear, correct, the charges she could be facing is up to 2 years in jail if it turns out that she made these anti-trans statements online. Charges are harassment and malicious communications if the harassment Twitter argument is deemed to be motivated by someone's protected characteristic. It's up to 2 years imprisonment. And here's actual photos of the police forcing their way into her home when she said, like, "Do you have a warrant?" This is her being frisked before she's taken away by police officers. She was later let go, but the investigation is still pending. But based upon my understanding, I'm just going to summarize the story here for you guys. But it appears that there was a complaint made against her that she was running another Twitter account in addition to her own Twitter account. On her own Twitter account, she regularly does bring into question certain trans narratives and explores, the consequences of some of these crazy laws we see being enforced, and some of just the social commentary that seems to come along with a lot of the woke left's perspective when it comes to identity politics. My understanding is the actual account that they're claiming isn't a doxed account, and she has stated that that wasn't hers. And it appears that, like, people literally, this isn't exactly a swatting per se, but essentially the equivalent of like a language swatting, in my humble opinion. And it blows my mind. And we need to be very careful here in Canada, because we're seeing all sorts of different language bills being put forward in our parliament currently, right? Whether we're looking at the proposition, I think it's Bill C-18 right now, that we've had both Google and YouTube as well as Twitter come out and speak against, which is going to force a certain amount of Canadian content on social media platforms in order to be on the right side of our content laws. Or whether we're looking at some of the hate and harassment bills that have been put, some have passed, some are still pending. This is of a real concern to me, because this feels so Orwellian that I can't even believe that we find ourselves in this position currently. Now, it appears that her legal team believes that they actually have cause to go after the Surrey police here, and those are the police that were enforcing this investigation. But Adam, quick thoughts that you want to share on this?
Yeah, this is just pathetic. And I agree with you. I think this is coming to a Canada near us. Bill C-11 is one that you guys should keep your eyes on. And that gives the CRTC unprecedented regulatory authority over online content. And I think that this is a situation where the frog is boiling 1 degree at a time, and you don't necessarily notice it. But all of a sudden you're at a rolling boil. And so I think anytime where we see this type of abuse of authority, or if you find yourself in a position where you have to say you can't do this because I say so, it's more than likely that the idea behind the authority you're trying to abuse is incorrect, or at least it doesn't stand up to scrutiny. If we can't have discourse about some of these topics, I would really call into question the foundation of which those topics are built upon. So, I just, it's unbelievable to me that this could occur.
Yeah, and yet it is every single day in the UK, and I believe that we'll see it adopted by other countries as well. And there's severe consequences to it. So I think
I'm
it's
out of
something that
here. I'm out of here
everyone
if that
watching should
happens.
be extremely aware of, because again, this is the tip of the iceberg, in my opinion. If we continue to slide down this slippery slope, we will all be the worse for it. But one quick little recommendation I wanted to share with you guys. We don't have time to play this clip, but if you missed it, Kanye West was actually on Tucker Carlson last night, and it's a two-part interview. This is the first part. If you're only going to watch one of the two parts, absolutely recommend you guys watch this clip. It's a fascinating insight into why Kanye decided to wear the White Lives Matter t-shirt. He's also wearing a lanyard, and on that lanyard is oh, not an x-ray. What do you call it when you get a photo of your child when in pregnancy? But anyways,
Ultrasound.
ultrasound. Yeah. So he's wearing an ultrasound of a child to highlight the fact, and he goes on to explore this, that assuming that you believe abortion is the murder of a child, that 50%, more than 50% of black murders are abortions. And he kind of explores some really thought provoking conversations. I encourage you guys to spend some time on it. I've really I enjoyed Kanye's music back when like him and Kid Cudi were popping off and things like that. But I've really grown to respect Kanye for his approach. I'm not going to say he's right on everything all the time. I think there's very few individuals outside of maybe Ron Paul that are truly right on everything. But I believe that he's always acting from a position of good faith, and he's trying to explore very complex issues, and he's trying to share his honest opinions on these subject matters. So I just have so much respect for him, and I think that for those of you that maybe have only ever consumed the mainstream media's narrative around Kanye, this will be a great pattern interrupt, because in 13 minutes, we actually learn a lot from his perspective. So again, just want to encourage you guys to go check that out. Next, I want to kind of switch gears here and circle back to Canada. And this to me is shocking because I thought we were done with the COVID narrative. However, spoiler alert, certain municipalities, certain jurisdictions here in Canada, they really want to hold on to the power they received. So the Peterborough Public Health advises no indoor gatherings ahead of Thanksgiving. So, Adam, don't know if you had Thanksgiving plans, but please try and not be a misogynist racist with unacceptable views that participates in Thanksgiving this weekend, because obviously Monday is Thanksgiving in Canada. And so they go on to essentially recommend via this public post that masks strongly recommended for all interactions with people from outside your household, avoid social gatherings in all indoor settings, and avoid attending high risk settings. Any thoughts or takeaways there, Adam? Are you surprised by this? Is this just is certain aspects of our government and our mainstream media so captured at this moment in time by the COVID hysteria that we should just grow to accept that this will always be their default position?
I'm not going to lie, Matt. I'm actually shocked that we haven't seen them front running the winter kind of flu seasons changing, COVID's coming back. I'm actually surprised that this is the first article I'm seeing about this. And I think I'm disappointed in myself for being surprised about this, but I expected them to run a full campaign, and to be completely honest, I believe they will run a full campaign about winter COVID and all that. And I'm sick of it, man. I'm so tired of it. I'm honestly, I feel exhausted by it, but I guess here we go again. It's Groundhog Day.
Yeah, it literally is Groundhog Day every single day here in Canada. Switching gears slightly, but staying on the Thanksgiving theme, just quickly wanted to share this article from Toronto Sun. Talking turkey, Thanksgiving dinner price tag soars amid ballooning grocery bills. Now, anyone that actually has to pay for their groceries, and where your food budget is actually a significant amount of your family's spending categories, this will probably come as no surprise. But the cost the cost of a classic roast turkey dinner with all the fixings, stuffing, mashed potatoes, gravy, cranberry sauce, green beans, pumpkin pie, and beverages now comes in at a total of $203.95 for a family of four with some leftovers. That's up about 12% from the 181.75 last year, according to figures gathered from Statistics Canada and grocery retailers. So food inflation has hit 10.8% in August compared with a year before, the fastest increase in grocery prices since 1981. So just kind of wanted to highlight this because, not only should people be aware of this, but again, as we talked about earlier on in the week, we've got stories like, retailers are now going to be able to charge an additional 2% if you choose to pay with credit cards. And there's lots of other stories about how, look at Justin Trudeau's political party and them wanting to triple some of the like greenhouse gases or climate change taxes that they've implemented here in Canada. Understand that from my perspective at least, it sort of feels like the government's doing their darndest to make sure that things continuously stay unaffordable for the average Canadian household. And I think it's important to highlight, food is a major spending category for the average family.
Yeah, I mean, I'm not sure what you're complaining about, Matt. You could always substitute. You don't need to eat turkey. You could just as easily afford some cheap insects or some other protein substitute.
Well, the funny thing is, usually those aren't actually more affordable substitutes either, right? Like, if you actually look at like what a cauliflower pizza or a cricket pizza or whatever you kind of want to look at, it's usually still similarly priced. It's not like it's dramatically cheaper. The argument often is that somehow is net benefit for the climate. But yeah, I don't know. It's just fascinating to say the least. However, this next story here, I'm not sure if it would have been on your radar yet, but this is from Zero Hedge, but it's been picked up by the Washington Post and a handful of other news outlets. But feds have enough evidence to slap Hunter Biden with tax and gun charges, according to the Washington Post. There's a lot to dissect here, and we're just going to highlight a couple points here because I do want to get into our last story as well before we have to wrap up. But of course, this reeks of containment strategy to avoid implicating the sitting president, as the feds apparently haven't been looking into ill-gotten gains from a massive international influence peddling operation while his dad was VP, vice president, for which there is ample evidence. Tucker Carlson's also came out and kind of called into question this. And in any event, it seems like Hunter may face justice over a sliver of his actual questionable dealings. So I don't know whether to take this as a good thing or a bad thing, right? I really do feel like this could easily be a containment strategy where simply they're trying to front load and get in front of things and charge him with a couple things that don't seem nearly as dramatic or as damning of his father. And so this is kind of like a way to massage the narrative in the direction. No one's perfect. Hunter did do a couple things that were questionable. We'll do an investigation. Maybe we'll lay charges. Who knows whether those charges will actually stick? But I think that this honestly is still the tip of the Hunter Biden iceberg, and I would much rather see a much more thorough investigation. Now, this originally stems from, I think, a 2017-2018 investigation under the Trump administration. And honestly, it feels like at most, if there's no other additional pending charges to come to light, that this is a slap on the wrist that will kind of satisfy the mainstream Republicans, right? Or the rhinos, Republican in name only. What are your thoughts here, Adam?
Well, I just would like to share a quick clip for everybody so that we all maintain our faith. No one fucks with a Biden, Matt. So I don't think we're going to see anything substantial or substantive come out of any of these types of charges. I mean, he was caught red-handed with all sorts of photos, like legitimate photos. Like, I mean, this isn't even like if the glove fits situation. It's like, no. We have the receipts. We have the evidence. We have the videos, the photos of him with hookers, drugs, everything, all on his laptop that was recovered at some computer shop, which is like the craziest blunder I've ever heard about. But he's not getting charged. He's not getting anything. He's not even going to get a real slap on the wrist, man. Like, if this was you, Matt, you would be so hauled off to jail, it wouldn't even be funny.
Well, or if this was a Meemaw or a Peepaw that happened to stumble into on January 6th when cops were at least depending upon the context of the situation, literally waving in protesters into the government buildings, you would be held for over a year without trial or charges being laid. Whereas obviously with Hunter Biden, different rules, right? As
Solitary confinement.
for some of them, yes. And as Carlin said, it's a big club and you're not in it. And day by day, it becomes more and more apparent, in my opinion, that this is a very big club and we are not part of that. And in fact, Kanye West even explores that in the second half of his conversation with Tucker Carlson about the Kardashians' relationships with the Clintons, and about essentially some of the discussions, I won't say threats, but discussions, the Kardashians and former managers and handlers of Kanye had, saying that it was career suicide if you dared show any support for Donald Trump. So again, this is a highlight of the hypocrisy, right? And understand, maybe you're watching this from Canada and you're like, hey, this is America. Canada, it's not so bad. Well, again, whatever happened to the We Charity scandal, right? What happened to the fact that the Trudeaus, between Justin Trudeau's mother and his wife, received over $400,000 in compensation from We Charity, which received tens of millions of dollars from the Canadian government, right? There was a really fascinating little clip that came out yesterday in the question period where Pierre Poilievre, and again, this is some political grandstanding, so I wish oftentimes that there was more bite to his statements. But there was the Gateway Casino scandal, right? And so if you guys haven't been following this, Gateway Casinos owns a series of casinos here in Canada. Recently, their stock just got delisted because it was decided it was such a poor investment. However, the Canadian government has invested $200 million into Gateway Casinos. So it's so fascinating to see the government continuously waste our tax dollars on these boondoggles, sometimes on direct scandals, in my opinion, like We Charity, or the AgaCon, or again, it's a long list that maybe eventually we'll do a deep dive one day. I think it's on our list of videos to do in the second half of the show sometime. Anything else on that, Adam, before I maybe switch gears into the final story I want to cover?
I mean, it's just striking. I mean, you have to be a bad actor to get delisted off the stock market. Okay. I mean, you can buy murder on the stock market. You can buy General Dynamics all day. We're shipping light armor vehicles into countries we have no business being in. And that's okay to buy on the stock market. But these guys are getting removed. Again, what a fantastic investment by our government with our tax dollars. I'm sure that's what you voted for, Matt.
And what was kind of funny is the way Pierre, I should have brought up the clip, but I don't have time here. But the way Pierre framed it for everyone was essentially when he asked this question about why the government invested $200 million, he said, will the individual that decided to invest $200 million into Gateway Casinos please stand up? And then the Speaker of the House is like, the Honorable Justin Trudeau. And yeah.
That's
and
perfect.
Understand, yeah, it's such a thing. And one story that I wasn't going to cover here, but just because I brought up the word honorable, and I can't help myself, this one to me isn't worth exploring at length. But again, I think just shows the unfortunate nature of sometimes us putting these individuals in such positions of power, but then also kind of insulating them from certain consequences, or giving them these terms such as honorable indefinitely, right, for life. So this was from CBC News. Former senator charged with sexual assault still retains honorable title for life. So will the honorable rapist please, again, obviously I'm making light of a serious situation here. But this is fascinating to me. And again, similar to the monarchy or other issues I've got with ill-gained positions and us wanting to elevate individuals in positions of power. They're already in position of power. We shouldn't actually have to give them any additional titles or rights or leeway when it comes to their day-to-day living. But anyways, enough of that. Let's get into the last story, because this one isn't a hot off the presses story. I've talked about this in the past. I'm a huge fan of the Mises Institute. I think they've got some of the best commentary, particularly on finances and economics, that you're going to find today. But the fraudulent social contract of bad money regimes. So bad money regimes base themselves on a dysfunctional social contract. You, the people, agreed to put up with a moderately good money in return for us, the regime, providing benefits in terms of employment and economic prosperity, which would be unavailable if you, the people, had insisted on a high quality money. Causality in the contract is upside down. The strong and stable demand which money of excellent quality from the viewpoint of the individual enjoys is essential to the monetary system not getting out of control, inflicting severe economic and social damage. And again, I can only highlight part of the article here, guys. I encourage you guys to spend some time and read the entire thing. They must reckon with worse than just the perpetual small annual loss of purchasing power, as stated in the 2% inflation standard prospectus, as periodically updated by the Federal Reserve and other central banks. There are long stretches of monetary repression where these institutions manipulate interest rates down to abnormally low levels. In between our high inflationary shocks, the loss of money purchasing power which occurs during these are not reversed subsequently. And again, that's all because of our bad money here, right? Or the way this article frames it, our moderately good money. At the level of society, there has been virulent money inflation featuring sometimes severe symptoms of asset inflation, sometimes of goods and service inflation. Monetary inflation has spawned the disease of economic sclerosis. This is recognizable by painfully slow, if any, gains in general economic well being, as rampant malinvestment and advancing monopoly power sap the dynamism, god damn it, dynamism of free market capitalism. Now, the spoken or unspoken fear of many is that another global financial crisis looms with its potentially devastating economic and social consequences. And I really think that this is an important conversation to explore here, at least at a high level, because so often we're told, one, that the central bankers, one of the reasons that we should be thankful for them is because they control inflation. Except for, as we've experienced over the last couple of years, they don't actually control inflation. We're told that they're experts that can essentially predict the future. And because they're capable of predicting the future, they help manage our economy in productive manners. Except for it seems like they regularly get their predictions wrong. And then last, I just wanted to hit upon here, defiance of the natural rhythm fosters asset inflation and subsequent bust. Defiance also paralyzes the invisible hands of the market forces guiding the distribution of spending over time. Again, really good article. I encourage you guys to go through all of it. But last point here I want to make is interest rates must be wholly market determined. Short-term money rates by conditions in the overnight market for reserves, which would pay no interest. Long-term rates by decentralized mass of individual decision makers with access, and this is what it would look like if we actually had a functional system. Decision makers with access to highly specific information. This latter includes the investment opportunities and the individual's preference for present versus future consumption. Financial engineering and surmising the course of Fed policy making would be no longer be the name of the game for investors. The random walker down Wall Street would enjoy the sunshine of well-founded growth and prosperity rather than the stress of navigating violent monetary tides. So the big argument here is that, in fact, these powers that be, the central bankers, right, those that deem themselves fit to manage our economy, don't do a good job of in the first place. And in fact, some of the violent experiences we have is caused by them, right? And now, again, oftentimes people will point back to before there was a central bank and show how there's booms and busts. Yes, but I understand that that's at least the true invisible hand of the market, right? That is at least humans being humans and having consequences to their actions. One of the crazy things, if you guys were watching the financial markets today, is that we saw on good labor news, so literally we saw that unemployment dropped, and yet that was a bearish sentiment for the market. Why was it a bearish sentiment for the market? Well, because if jobless claims are down, if unemployment's down, presumably central bankers will continue to aggressively increase interest rates. And so now they're starting to price in a 75 basis points assumption into the market, which actually brings things down. So today is a perfect example, in my opinion, of why we should be having these discussions, because what we end up having is individuals that are participating in the global markets that aren't focused on trying to efficiently and effectively smooth demand curves and things of that nature, but instead they're trying to predict or game the system according to central bankers.
Yeah, Matt, I can't see why you wouldn't be a proponent of modern monetary theory or something like that, where we could just financially engineer everything into the perfect world that we would hope it would be. I don't know. Calling for good money seems a little bit ridiculous when we need to have no bid contracts for companies like Halliburton or these scandals we want to do, like the weed charity thing. It's really difficult to do that with good sound money.
Yeah, absolutely, because it means that it's harder to manipulate the markets. And, there's less tendency towards monopolization versus the crony capitalism that we see regularly implemented here in the West.
Matt, I got to tell you, this is sounding like a Black Pill episode. And I think we're just about to wrap up with that was being our last show, our last article that we're going to share on the last 24.
Well,
I think it's about time, Matt. Oh, no, you've come.
Can I jump in here to take it from Black Pill to White Pill?
Yes,
because
please.
To quote the cyber hornets, Bitcoin fixes this. Bitcoin is sound money. Bitcoin is good money. And Bitcoin cannot be manipulated by market makers and central bankers the way our fiat currencies can be. So for those of you that, hopefully at least some of the stuff I was talking about made sense. Hopefully you understood the context of the article I was sharing. If you don't like the sounds of that, if you think that we should have good or even great sound money, please do yourself a favor and start looking into Bitcoin. It's on sale right now.
Yeah, to say the least. And with that being said, guys, we're actually about to transition into the next half of our show where we actually are going to be talking about our favorite movies. Okay, it's Friday, and every Friday we're going to sort of hang out with you guys and have more of a community type day and show. So I'm hoping you guys will join in the conversation. Jump in our Telegram chat if you guys can see the description and the link below. Jump in there, engage with us. Let us know, what are some of your favorite movies? What's your favorite comedy? What's your favorite horror flick? What's your favorite action film? What's your Christmas Eve film? Let us know. Let us know some of the engaging films that you bring back every year and perhaps watch on repeat. That's what we're going to be talking about in the next half of the show. And we're going to be, looking forward as we continue to grow this show to see more engagement from you guys, that we can have some back and forth with you, the viewer. So appreciate anybody watching this. And that's going to be the end of the last 24 for today.
They say life is what you make it. So what happens if you actually try? What if you actually tried to get your mind right? What if you actually tried to live the high life? What if you happen to die cause life is finite? What if you actually tried to live your best day ever? What if you actually tried to get your mind right? What if you actually tried to live the high life? What if you happen to die cause life is finite? What if you actually tried to live your best day ever? What if you actually grind out when the time's right? What if you actually blinded by your hindsight? What if you actually find out what defines life? What if you actually tried to live your best day ever? I'm getting 1% better every day. I'm getting 1% better every way. I'm waking up every day to a sunny day, no matter what the weather say. Life is like a record, so just let it play. Educate, motivate, entertain and demonstrate. Health, wealth, relationships and legacy we elevate. Every day is what you make it, so don't take it and waste it. Never too late to save it. Remember, roses grow from pavement. Let me break this down in layman's. Just wanna live outrageous, build my way to greatness. Gotta speak my truth and face it. Hear the basis lies, gotta challenge it and break it. Take a shot of truth, chase it with some motivation. The best day ever, the best day ever. We gon' squad up, have the best day together. Best day ever, best day ever. We gon' squad up, go harder than any weather. What if you actually tried to get your mind right? What if you actually tried to live the high life? What if you happen to die cause life is finite? What if you actually tried to live your best day ever? What if you actually tried to get your mind right? What if you actually tried to live the high life? What if you happen to die cause life is finite? What if you actually tried to live your best day ever? What if you actually grind out when the time's right? What if you actually blinded by your hindsight? What if you actually find out what defines life? What if you actually tried to live your best day ever? I'm getting 1% better every day. I'm getting 1% better every way. I'm waking up every day to a sunny day, no matter what the weather say. Life is like a record, so just let it play. Best Day Ever Media. Song by Dan the Lost Boy.
All right, guys, we're back. And so today's kind of our Friday hangout day. That's what we want to do every day of the week. And in fact, next Friday, we'll be hanging out with our buddy Dan, who actually put together that song. He sings it, he wrote it, he does the whole bit. So next week, we're going to be hanging out with Dan, talking about favorite concert experiences. And eventually, what we'd love this segment every Friday in the afternoons to be is where eventually we bring on some of our viewers, hang out with you guys, and have these sort of conversations. Obviously, it's a very new show. So we're not expecting to get a lot of reach day one. But if you guys would ever love to come out and hang out on a Friday video call like this and just kind of shoot the shit with me and Adam and whoever else happens to join us, let us know. And the best way to do so is by joining our Telegram chat, right? Be a part of it. Help us build this community. Please consider sharing these videos, because at the end of the day, what we want to do with this show is not only cover the news articles in the first half, but in most days, right? Like Monday is personal finance in the second half, Tuesdays is personal development and health, Wednesdays is everything about politics, history, and what we like to call cheaper than therapy. And then Thursdays is random hobbies, interests, and rabbit holes that we may go down. And we really do want to help both, like me and Adam want to strive to have the best day ever ourselves, as well as try and share that with you guys, the audience. So really appreciate you guys hanging out with us, watching these videos, and we look forward to growing the BDE community.
Yeah, I think community is obviously one of the core pillars of what we're trying to build here. And I think just the more you guys can engage with us, the more great content we can continue to produce for you. And it's always great to have people in the community sharing their voice as well. I mean, we're just two guys with our own perspectives, and often, it's helpful to have outside opinions as well, because we can find ourselves in echo chambers sometimes. But I don't suspect we are going to be in an echo chamber on this show, Matt, because I think that you and I think we both have exceptional taste in media and in movie. I'm going to give us that trait. But I think that we'll probably come up with different answers for some of these questions that you might have for us about, what are our favorite movies? What are those movies that we play on repeat? Just before we started the show, I was kind of posing the question, like, what's your Christmas evening movie? Do you guys have any traditions like that, Matt, at your house?
At my house, no, but there are a couple like mini series that I revisit every like December, right? So in the Christmas season, although they got nothing to do with Christmas, but I feel like that's kind of the classic play, right? When people say that
Yeah.
Die Hard's a Christmas movie. So for
Yeah.
myself, two of the mini series that I regularly visit every December is the Men Who Built America, which I imagine eventually will get canceled and replaced by individuals that fit the woke identity politics. But it's a fantastic, like, I think it's a 4 or 6 part series, and explores some of the great industrialists of the 19th and 20th century. Now, don't get me wrong, these individuals aren't saints, but I find it a fascinating exploration of how they came and rose to such prominence in business and power. So looking at like Carnegie, at JP Morgan, and Ford, and I forget, there's at least a couple others that are documented in that series as well. But the one that I watch every single December is Band of Brothers. And again, not necessarily like a Christmas themed miniseries, but it's just so good. And I think that the first time I ever watched it was in December, like during like Christmas break. And so I've just never not kept up that tradition. So I'd love to hear, do you have like a Christmas tradition there, Adam?
Yeah, I mean, we consider, I mean, I'm not watching The Men Who Built America. Jesus, Matt, I wasn't expecting that. But, and in fact, I've actually never even seen that series. So that's
Oh,
giving
dude,
me some
it's
homework.
honestly so good.
But we always, we never miss a Christmas without watching Home Alone. And if you're not watching Home Alone, I don't know. It's one of the most fantastic films ever. It's so fun. It's so funny. I love the scene when they're in the airplane and they finally realize, Kevin, right? They're like, oh, we left the garage door open. Like, no, it's not that. And then the mom, eventually they both realize, look at each other. Oh, we've left Kevin. And, it seems a little bit perhaps ridiculous as a premise, but I have like a dog and a cat, and like already I'm like, do we have the dog? Is she here? Is she awake? Is she in the crate? Where's the dog? So I could see if you had 7 or 8 kids running around, plus aunts, uncles, everybody's trying to get in the van, in the taxi, ready for travel, and you leave one of them behind, especially the quiet one. and just all the hilarity that ensues with that. And in fact, if you guys do a little bit of digging into that film, those actors are actually like bailing hard. They are really actually falling and hitting their heads and stuff on some of those stunts. So kind of a little known fact about that movie is like they actually really hurt themselves during that film. Like the scene in particular that I'm thinking about is where I think his name's Merle or something, but one of the bad guys anyways, they Kevin pours he pours water on the stairs and it freezes obviously because it's set in winter, and they create ice on the stairs, and that actually happened. And miraculously, it turns out too, they were trying to figure out how the hell do we create this winter scene? Because I forget where it's set specifically, but it should by no means have snowed. And it actually snowed on the day of filming for the scene where they capture the scene of the front of the house. And it just like, they were trying to figure it out with like potato and like these flakes essentially that they used to like simulate snow. And then it just snowed for them. So they had to call all the cast in. They had to literally fly people from all over America in to film the front scene of the mansion that they kind of lived in. Because it was snowing somehow. They were like, Jesus Christ, it's snowing. Let's get everybody here for this shot. But they freeze those stairs, and that actor actually bails. I mean, he like straight up falls down like four or five steps, like onto his head on the pavement. And man, that's not good. That's really bad actually, for trauma. And I see here, actually, we've got a comment right now of a favorite movie. And I happen to work with Kyle, obviously. And we had a Christmas party for the company once. We rented out this cottage up north, and we had a Christmas party, and Kyle and I stayed up until, I don't know, man, 3 or 4 in the morning drinking beer and watching National Lampoon's Christmas Vacation. And let me tell you, that is an absolute banger of a Christmas movie.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, absolutely. I'm trying to think of some other like Christmas classics, but there's a lot out there, right? And Home Alone definitely sits high on that list, in my opinion.
Yeah, I mean, Home Alone. What else? What else are you gonna do? I do like Die Hard. I think I kind of overwatched it as a kid. It was on. Did you guys have satellite TV? So you had like the movie channels.
Like we did for a brief period of time, but not extensively. No.
But Die Hard. I mean, it was playing every day. I mean, I don't know if they played anything other than Die Hard. It was just Die Hard. That was it. That was the only movie you could watch.
Gotcha. And so before we get into like our, like both my and Adam's favorite 3 movies, we've got a handful of other kind of little subjects we want to explore around movies in general. So I'll hit you up with these questions first, Adam, and then share my thoughts and experiences. But first things first, is there a movie that you watched an absurd amount of times growing up?
Absolutely. And I don't think I'll ever stop watching this movie. I watch it at least probably twice a year. And that's Saving Private Ryan. I grew up. It was when you bought the VHS, and this is dating both of us here, but when you had the VHS, it was actually 2 cassettes. It was 2 different tapes. And the extra tape was a bunch of like behind the scenes and bonus content. And before my grandparents had got their rewinder, you know, like those specific machines that would like just its only purpose was to rewind the tapes, man, it would take forever because that film is really long. I think it's close. It's like 2.5 hours or something, maybe even a bit longer than that. And man, you would just wait forever. But I would watch the whole film on the VHS and then rewind it and just press play again. And I always thought that opening scene, I mean, just this is cinematography at its absolute finest. They take, spoiler alert, if you haven't seen this, I don't know what you're doing with your life, but they take Ryan, the character Ryan that they're trying to save throughout the whole movie, and he's old, and he's there with his wife. Oh man, I'm getting emotional here. He's there with his wife, and they're at the graveyards of the men, like Captain Miller and the other men that were on the mission to save him, and he's old. And then it fades. I'm literally, I have goosebumps. My hair just stood up. It like crossfades into him as a young man. And then it begins the story. And where the film ends is again with him at the graves as an old man sort of reflecting on the story. And it is just, it is a fucking heart wrencher, man. Like if you don't cry at that scene, you probably don't have a soul. But that scene gets me, man. And I'm actually going to do a whole deep dive on Saving Private Ryan for you guys. I want to unpack leadership in that film because there's actually so much to unpack in that movie. It's insane. How about yourself, Matt?
Yeah, absolutely love Private Ryan. But growing up, I guess to give a little bit of context, as I mentioned, like we only got like 6 channels on a good clear day at home in regards to TV. So we had a handful of VHS movies that we would just watch like ad nauseum. A couple that immediately come to mind is one we actually talked about yesterday, which was Turner and Hooch. So that movie watched a crazy amount. Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles, the first movie, watched that an absurd amount of times. And there would just be like kind of different seasons, I guess, like where you'd like, oh, at this age we watch this movie all the time, and Wayne's World and a handful of other movies like
Oh,
that, and absolutely loved being able to rewatch them. Although again, like I'm shocked some of those VHSs didn't completely wear out. But I'm curious because you're obviously younger than I am, Adam. When growing up, was it like theater or VHS or DVD rentals for you guys in regards to like movies when like when you first get exposed to a new movie?
yeah. We had what was called the Cinema 4, which was the worst design I've ever seen. Completely level seating. Okay, so these nice reclining chairs now that are all on a nice steep angle. None of that nonsense. If you were short, you were not seeing the film. And so we would go to the Cinema 4. I would love to know what my first movie there would have been, but I recall watching like Lord of the Rings at that theater as they were coming out. Um, some Star Wars movies and stuff like that. But yeah, we would certainly go to Cinema 4, and that was actually our Tuesday thing. I believe it was $2 or $4 on a Tuesday. You could go for cheap movie night, and so we would go every Tuesday. Literally, I think every Tuesday with my friends to the cinema. And then if it wasn't the cinema, it was Rogers Video. Right, Rogers Video was the freaking jam, and this is before Blockbuster. I'm obviously from a smaller town, being Collingwood, and so things took a while. I mean, Blockbuster took forever to get to Collingwood, but that was revolutionary because the late fees were actually quite punitive. If you didn't bring a movie back, it was bad. And I don't know why it was such a problem to bring the movie back. It's a small town; it's like probably a 4-minute drive from where we lived. But sometimes you wouldn't bring the thing back, and then you're getting murdered at Rogers for bringing your VHS back. And for sure DVDs took forever. So not a lot of DVDs. And then all of a sudden everything was DVD. But I still have at my house, I still have a TV with a built-in VHS player. And so we can spin up some Lion King or, Otis or something like that. And yeah, I mean, that was it. I mean, it was so cool hanging out on a Tuesday night, going to the movies, $4 a pop, and just, get some $10 popcorn. Popcorn, inflation hasn't hit popcorn the way you would think, because the movies have tripled, but the popcorn's still expensive as hell. But it's
Okay,
always
I was
been
gonna say
expensive.
like it's got to be like $10 plus a bag, probably, right? These
Oh,
days
oh,
at the movie
oh, it's
theater.
like 20. Yeah, it's like $20. But I mean, like, movies have tripled, but the popcorn's only doubled. So it's like,
Mm,
somewhere something doesn't make perfect sense here. How about yourself,
gotcha.
Matt? Were you were obviously a VHS guy, right?
Yeah, especially because like movie theater, like the closest movie theater to us growing up would have been just over or around an hour drive because back then Masonville didn't even have a movie theater, so you had to go to
Right.
the far side of London from the farm I grew up on. So we'd always
Oh
have
man.
VHS rentals, and unless I was in town with one of my like sleeping over at a friend's house, we would go to like a little variety store, literally in the middle of nowhere.
Cool.
And because we're in the middle of nowhere, everyone knows each other. So like I don't think late fees existed at the variety store. Like Mary would never charge you a late fee, but you also had a very small selection of movies to go from. So it was like just 2 rows. I like it would be until I was in high school before I was exposed to like an actual movie rental place where it's like, oh shit, like they've got like sections and
Yeah.
themes and things like that, and you can watch old movies or a brand new movie. But it was always great. Although kind of a running gag with everyone that went to that movie store was you would go there, pick out your movie, and then spend half an hour talking to Mary, updating her on what was going on with your family and all that, because again, small towns. Um, The next question I want to kind of explore with you is, what was your home movie setup like? For us, literally when I was like very young, so like let's say like kindergarten, grade 1, that sort of era, our movie setup was we had one of those like big tube TVs in a wooden box without a remote, where you literally had to turn the knob in order to change the stations.
Now,
And it wasn't
when you
until
say
like
big,
I mean, like it, like because again, it was like a wood frame, right? That this TV's in, so it was probably like a, I don't know, like a, it wouldn't have been 30 inches, but it like way bigger than a 30-inch tube TV if you were familiar with like the
yep.
plastic tube TVs, because again, this was a big wooden box that eventually, I think at one point in time, like I took and we took out the TV and we're going to like put an aquarium in there and stuff like that. Because again, like just massive and super heavy.
They're so
But
heavy.
yeah. But that was my original like home movie setup. So what was your guys? Did you guys have like external speakers and TV remotes and all kinds of fancy things?
Okay, so here's the setup. I'm gonna paint in Fair Verona. We lay our scene. We had this house that it was an absolute piece of shit growing up, but we were fortunate enough to have 2 different TVs. Okay, which was just mental. But the front TV didn't have VHS capacity, right? So whatever that setup was like, I just remember it didn't have the ability to play VHSs or DVDs later. And so we had this back room, and the back room was this like uninsulated addition that was just an absolute hack of a job. So the floor, I don't even know how to like put this, but like there must not have been anything below the floor. Like it was just straight up probably framed and then like they probably just put a floor on top of framing. And so the floor, it was so cold back there. Like it was miserable, but we had this gas fireplace, and so we had this gas fireplace. We'd light that up, right? So get the fire going, turn all the lights off. And what we would do is we actually had this futon back there, right? You guys remember futons? Yeah, come on, 90s, let's go. So we had this futon, and we would fold the futon down and make this big bed area. And so my mom would probably hang out on the futon, and I would actually take a pile of blankets and chill on the floor. So you needed a bunch of blankets, or you're going to freeze to death. So got a bunch of blankets, roll those up on the floor, grab some pillows. And then we had, similar to what you're saying, just the heaviest piece of crap. It was probably about 30 inches, maybe a bit smaller, rear projection plastic TV. And it had the built-in VHS thing in it. And occasionally, if you rewound the VHSs in that, it would just spool the VHS out, like spool the tape out of the cassette, which was a real bitch if you were renting it. So that was miserable. That's how we wrecked Independence Day, which was my favorite at the time. But man, you remember Independence Day. But that TV, I mean, so much happened on that. I'm talking PlayStation 1. I'm talking N64. Lots of great memories with that TV. And I had a friend who, Michael, whose family had one of those big honking rear projector, like actual huge TVs. And like that to me just blew my mind. Like those actual, like, do you remember these things? They were like 50 inches or something insane at the time. And they weighed they probably weighed 700 pounds. Like they were so fucking heavy. And we had to move it one time, and literally my back still hurts. I can feel it. Yeah, I mean, that used to be the jam. If you could go over to Mike's house and play Halo or something, that was like completely out of control.
And so you talking about connecting video games like systems to your TV made me think of this. And I saw Al shared this too. This is probably true of the TV we had.
Yeah.
I probably remember it as being bigger than it was, but like 60-inch wood frame with a 21-inch screen. That probably was it. But I can remember when I was I don't know, in kindergarten, grade 1, for Christmas. I think it was Christmas. We got a Super Nintendo, right? And I was like so amped, so excited about the Super Nintendo. But this was like pre-internet. So any sort of rumor your parents had ever heard was just truth. If another adult had told them something, that was just like a fact until proven otherwise. And you couldn't just like Google and be like, no, mom and dad, you're crazy. And so there was a rumor amongst farmers that if you connected a video game system to a TV, that it might freeze the screen and ruin your TV. And so you couldn't risk it on the good TV. So I ended up having to, like, for the longest time, I had to play my Super Nintendo on like this tiny little like 13-inch screen that we had as like our other TV, because like you knew it was going to destroy your main TV if you use it. I don't know why it wouldn't destroy the small TV, but again, just like one of those kind of funny, silly things when you
Oh,
look back on it, because like now you could just Google that and be like, no, mom and dad, that's fake news.
dude, you just reminded me. I used to have this little TV. Oh man, I totally forgot about this TV. You just totally reminded me. I had this freaking TV, and it was all in one, so VHS TV. But I think I think it was 12 inches. I think it was a 12-inch TV. It was such a piece of shit, but it was like probably 30 inches deep. Like it was like super deep and super stupid and heavy and awkward. And if you picked it up, it always fell forward out of your hands. But that piece of crap, man, the color was miserable. Everything had this like sepia white tone to it. But man, cranking Goldeneye on that thing in my bedroom, because like that was the play. All right, I got this 12-inch TV, but it was in my room. That was like next level, because prior to that, the only thing you could do in your room was read books. And I used to crank like a lot of books when I was a kid. I would probably crank a book a week. So, having the introduction of this television in my bedroom, and this is at a time when, of course, I mean, we're talking zero internet, zero cell phones, right? Like this was truly next level to be able to play GoldenEye in your bedroom. It was like the first type of like, real multimedia experience that we would ever have. Right. And man, that was ultimate. I totally forgot about that.
So switching gears here, let's talk about like favorite movie experience. And I've got a couple examples here that I'd love to hear from any audience members, and then I'll share a couple, and I'd love to hear yours, Adam. But is there a movie that you remember standing in line for an insane amount of time? Is there a movie that like you skipped school for, or like maybe you remember like high school and drive-ins? One of the really cool things about where I grew up was we actually had a drive-in like 10 minutes away, less than 10 minutes away from where I grew up. And so once high school, once I had the vehicle, like that was the play, right? Was to go to the drive-in, usually a double feature. Some weekends there'd be a triple feature, and the shenanigans you could get into in a car with high school friends and things like that was just amazing. But one other thing we used to do when like later on in high school was going to the movie theater for a double feature. And this was like Masonville had just opened up, I think. And what we would do, you'd pay for one movie, right? Watch that movie and then sneak into another theater and catch a second movie on the end. And honestly, there's probably like dozens of movies that we did that for.
Yeah, that's awesome. I don't think I ever did that. We certainly snuck into movies, but I don't think we ever doubled up. But one thing that we always used to do, it was kind of a family tradition for a long time, was every long weekend, the drive-in in Barrie would play that triple feature. They used to call it From A Dusk Till Dawn. And that's actually how it played out. Like as soon as the sun went down, they would start playing the first movie.
Mm-hmm.
And generally speaking, when you started leaving, it was like the sun was coming up. What a fascinating time. And you know what's crazy is I honestly don't remember what movies we saw there. Like I just don't remember. But
can I share another like little drive-in theater story? So
yeah.
in I think my last year of high school, or it might have been my first year in university, I honestly don't remember. No, it must have been high school. The drive-in went up for sale. And
No way.
do you want to guess what the price of it was back then? This would have, let me think, around 2000, let's say. And it was a drive-in, the one near Grand Bend. You might have even driven by it or seen it.
Oh, the
before.
Mustang?
If that's what it's called, they renamed it. I think the Mustang was near St. Thomas, if I'm not mistaken.
Oh, yeah.
This was the
yeah.
Starlight. But yeah, any guesses on what a movie, like a drive-in movie theater, was going for back then?
I would be completely shooting in the dark, but like I don't know, a couple 100,000 or something.
30 grand.
Oh!
And I can remember on like New Year's Eve, we rented like a hotel room, and we had to talk our way in because we were teenagers and they didn't want to rent hotel rooms to us. And like one of the things I pitched my friends on while we were like whatever partying in the hotel room was, we should buy this. I was like, my car's worth like 3,000. Jeff, your car is like worth 3,000. Like we could sell our cars. I've got $5,000 in savings, and like trying to put together this like joint venture deal to buy the movie theater. One of our friends worked at the drive-in, so like we felt like we knew how to run it and stuff. And honestly, I wish I would have bought that. Although my life timeline probably would look so different than it does today. But I remember it was like 4 acres, and I was like, guys, worst case scenario, we can tear it down and we can use it as farmland. And like there's just all these like pivots and A, B, and C plans I had, and yeah, it was just $30,000. Like it was
That's
free,
crazy.
essentially.
Yeah, that's absolutely crazy. You guys would have been the original Little Rascals gang, the Goonies, Stranger Things for the kids these days. That would have been hilarious, man. Imagine your life. But I mean, that you guys probably would have had a blast doing it. All the popcorn you could ever eat.
Right. And honestly, I bet we would have made money from it. But anyways,
30 grand.
Right. I know.
Like, holy
The
shit.
interest and mortgage wouldn't have been much, that's for sure. Next question I've got on the list here, Adam, is there a favorite franchise? I know I saw Kyle jump in with Harry Potter, I think he mentioned. Is there a favorite movie franchise that stands out for you?
Oh, I mean, I would have to be, I would be so freaking torn, man. But if I'm being honest with myself, I believe that the Bond franchise is closest to my heart. I always kind of idolized the Bond character, for obvious reasons. I mean, the character is engineered to be sort of, the most interesting man in the world, if you will. And so he can dance, he can order things at restaurants, that people are impressed with. He's wearing fantastic suits. He's running around chasing women, shooting crazy cool guns, shooting from motorcycles. He can drive any type of motor vehicle. He can fly helicopters. He can fly planes. He is escaping lasers and ice hotels. And you're like, man, this is freaking cool. So I think the James Bond franchise is fantastic. Kyle's just put in the comments here the Bourne series regarding Jason Bourne and that character. I loved that series as well. I don't love where they took that series recently, but I believe that the Bond movies are still to this day coming out incredibly high quality. I think the story is still great, which is honestly a lost art, I believe. Because like if you look at what happened to say the Jurassic Park franchise, like that has gone so far downhill. It's embarrassing. And I find today too, and I don't want to steal the spotlight here, Matt, but I find like the Marvel movies now are just miserable if we want to consider that a franchise, right? Or maybe have to lump like Iron Man or whatever specifically together.
Like there's almost sub franchises there, right?
It's awful.
Iron Man has multiple movies.
Yeah.
Like you've got the Avengers with multiple movies. Yeah.
What about you, Matt? What do you think is your favorite franchise? Mission Impossible? Huh?
No, I've watched one of them, but I've never watched a full James Bond movie, or a full Jason Bourne movie. I don't think. But
Matt, you would love. I guarantee you. I don't know about your position on Bond, but I absolutely assure you that you would love the Jason Bourne series.
See,
it's got a very gray man
started watching
thing.
a couple of them, and it just never took for whatever reason. But like I do love like TV series on spies and stuff like that. But I guess it just feels like I get to sink my teeth more into those worlds that get crafted through TV series versus movies. I don't think I've got like a standout franchise that I'm like, this is the hill to die on. This is the greatest movie franchise ever. But a couple ones that I might just throw out that are off the beaten trail when people are probably thinking about franchises is like Mighty Ducks 1 and 2. We watched a lot of that growing up.
Yeah.
I think that probably if I was trying to pick like a true movie franchise that I enjoyed, like X-Men actually is one. And it's partly because they were the first super hero movie to really come out, right? It was like Spider-Man and X-Men, because like those were from Fox, not even from Marvel Studios, and really enjoyed. There's some hit or miss ones, but honestly, like there's some decent, even recent additions to the X-Men series that I definitely enjoyed, and always just loved the concept of the X-Men in general. So
who's your favorite X-Men?
Well, it's kind of a loaded question because it depends on the era we're talking about. If I just had to choose straight up,
you're a Magneto
Iceman,
guy
because he's one of the most powerful. Like he's considered like one of the most extreme. Like there's different tiers. Like if you want to get super nerdy, there's different tiers of X-Men, and like he's on a whole different level. But if we're talking from the original cartoons, like there's just no way Gambit and Wolverine aren't everyone's favorite, in my opinion.
I mean, Wolverine was the. I mean, I'm thinking back too to like the original artwork, right, where Wolverine's wearing that yellow suit. Do you remember that? Wolverine's wearing yellow. He's got blue on him and stuff. Man, that version of Wolverine is gangster. I would have pegged you as a Magneto guy. I think.
Magneto's a complex character that
Yeah.
actually is really fun to explore and enjoy, but I guess I'm so biased because he was the clear bad guy in like the cartoons. So like that kind of like jaded me a bit, but I definitely love some of the explorations and the different movies that have came out around him. And again, really complex character. Really love in general the exploration. Although kind of tangential here, but one thing that's interesting is I was listening to some nerds talk about X-Men, and one of the things they brought up is very soon Magneto might start to feel irrelevant or too old because his story is always he grew up in a concentration camp, right? And now like it's almost unbelievable that an individual growing up in a concentration camp would still be like physically relevant in a certain way, right? Because like, you know, we're 80 years out and soon we'll be 100 years out from there. And so that's just, you know, an interesting little talking point, I guess I've heard some people share. But next thing I kind of want to explore with you, Adam, is there a movie that like broke your brain? Or maybe if broke your brain doesn't work right, is there a movie that like just scared the shit out of you or traumatized you?
Yes. To this day, The Orphan. And I'm not giving anything away. If you have not seen this film, it remains the GOAT. It is the absolute GOAT of horrifying concepts. I mean, I did not like that. I watched it originally actually at one of these Dusk to Dawns. So I was at the drive-in in the car, which is particularly creepy when you're a kid because like you're in the back. Actually, we had a van at the time. So I was in the back of the van with the hatch up, laying there in the back. And like my mom and my stepdad were sitting outside the van, and I always laid inside the van. So I was alone. It was dark. Man, that film is so disturbing, and it got me. It still freaks me out. So I would say, yeah, that one crushed me. Another film. Oh, well, you go, because there's another one that I was thinking of that like actually did break my mind, and I was like, "What in the goddamn hell?" Oh, Inception. When I was like, Inception came out when I was in like probably high school or maybe elementary, but man, that one I was like, "Whoa, what do you mean he's dreaming?" And like when he's falling into the bathtub and stuff, I was like, "Jesus, this is a crazy premise." So certainly those films, and The Matrix was obviously very thought-provoking as well.
Yeah, actually, the first two Matrix were good too.
Fantastic.
So that's actually an honorable mention, I guess, for like movie franchises.
Yeah, and it's funny you brought up the Mighty Ducks because I actually think so. I was never a huge Mighty Ducks fan, but I think the people that are like cult followers. Like whoever is a Mighty Ducks fan is like forever gonna claim that's one of the best movies.
I mean, if you've got no respect for the Flying V, I just don't think you're going to make it. There's just like, and the knuckle puck, and like, there's so many of those just, like classic things that would never actually work in hockey, but it's so fun cinematically to explore.
How about you, Matt? What
recent
movie
or like recent-ish that like broke my brain? I think that Inception's always like a great reference there, but Interstellar was one that like really like where I was like, whoa. And usually when I'm watching a movie, like I'm high. And I was like, God damn, like this is a lot to take in here right now. And obviously like really high production value and things of that nature. But yeah, there was something that almost felt like when I was watching it that honestly felt like a psychedelic experience almost at one point in time.
Yeah, tell me you didn't cry too when he's looking through the dust at his daughter.
Yeah, well, like it was just so interesting
crazy
to like get the context after the fact of that, right? And like there was something, yeah, like that was actually like one of those, like it almost felt like a psychedelic experience where like kind of felt the intertwinings of the universe, and yet you also couldn't like fix things, and yeah, just like really interesting, fascinating in my opinion.
Absolutely.
So moving on from that, is there like a movie that's most disliked or hated, or a movie where you're like, this is just terrible and it should be stricken from the records?
Yeah, Jesus, I'm having a brain fart here. There is a movie, and it is probably the worst movie of all time. But one movie that I found particularly distasteful was The Invitation.
I don't
That
know if I've
movie
seen
was,
it.
oh God, just save your time. It's kind of like that book, The Subtle Art of Not Giving a Fuck. They're both miserable. Mark Manson could fall off a cliff. Nobody would lose. But yeah, The Invitation was miserable. The other movie that I thought was really, really stupid, but it was so loved and so well received by critics and online was that movie with the Korean family. I think it was called oh shit. I'm gonna have to look this up. But the it was this Insidious or something like that. It was like this Korean family that were like the premise is like essentially this family um their kids start integrating themselves in like wealthy people's lives and then eventually kill them and sort of like take over their wealth and status and homes and stuff, and like they integrate like really thoroughly. So like the kid goes and like gets a job whatever, cutting the grass for the family, and then the mom like gets the job like cleaning the house, and then eventually they just kind of take over the person's house. But it was
Oh, I think you're muted, Adam.
sorry, can you hear me now?
Yeah.
But yeah, I mean, that movie was just absolutely brutal. I'm going to clarify. I think it was called Insidious. How about
Interesting.
yourself?
Yeah. There's not a movie that really stands out to me. I've definitely seen bad movies, but I don't know if there's any movies I'd go out of my way. And I actually decided I'd pull up here. Maybe I'll do a quick screen share. I'm just on Rotten Tomatoes, which maybe is a questionable site if you're trying to really get honest takes on things. But I'm just looking through their list of 100 worst movies, and like, there's none that either I've seen or that like create an emotional response to me. But I know I've seen some bad ones. But yeah, there's nothing that really stands out, I guess, when I'm thinking about like terrible movies. Have you found the name of the movie that you were thinking of?
I've found out that it's not called Insidious. Oh, it's called Parasite. Parasite.
Oh,
It's
that
called
sounds
Parasite.
familiar.
Well, because
Okay.
the internet was lit up, dude. The whole internet, the whole timeline was about this movie. And I'm telling you, it is so bad. It is honestly one of the stupidest movies of all time. But now that I've looked it up, it's actually based on a true story, which is actually really
That's
creepy now
weird.
that and yeah, I guess if you haven't seen this movie, I honestly don't think it's worth your time, but it is just so bad. And here it is. I've brought it up on the screen. Maybe this will jog your memory if
I've
you.
seen it. I've never actually watched it. Like, I've seen that cover and I've definitely heard of it, but I haven't spent the time to watch it. And now I don't
Yeah.
think I will.
No, honestly, Matt, please save yourself.
One movie I just want to circle back to that just popped into my head. It's a great movie. It's not on my list of favorite 3 movies though, but and it didn't like break my brain, but I guess one of the best movies, one of the best movie twists in my opinion, that doesn't go over the top, Training Day. I really love that movie. And
Oh,
again, like when he does what's he end up doing? Like it's not coke, but he ends up like snorting something, right? And he thinks it's like coke and it ends up being I don't think it's heroin either. But anyways, like that scene of like being messed up and like kind of out of control, and then the twist, and yeah, I actually just love that movie a lot.
fantastic film. I love the scene where they're driving, they're on the overpass. He just like, stop the car, stop the car, stop the car. He jumps out, shoots the guy, and then it's this whole thing. Um, like fantastic film.
Interesting. I'm just
Um,
looking here. Al shared with us, and I'm not sure if this is a reference to the Saved by the Bell movie. I know I've seen it, but I don't actually fully remember it. But here's a worst movie nominee: the one where the girl from Saved by the Bell was a stripper after she graduated high school. Um, I'll have to Google that because I definitely
great.
don't remember that movie. But um, I feel like we've kind of dragged this out long enough. Let's jump into our 3 favorite movies. And do you feel like you can order them decently, Adam? Because if so, I'd like to go like both of our 3rd favorite movies, then our 2nd favorite movies, and then our 1st favorite movies.
Oh, okay. This was difficult for me. So I think I'd like to start with that. How do you actually pick 3 movies? I mean, do you start approaching this categorically? Like, do you have to think like, okay, well, there's action, there's horror, there's
No, because
suspense,
mine are all
thrillers.
like in a similar niche for sure.
Okay, interesting. Okay,
And I guess one of the ways I judge favorite movie is like, could I watch it almost indefinitely? Right.
okay,
Again, like all 3 of my favorite movies, if you were like, you can only bring 3 movies to watch on a desert island, I probably would at least 2 of these 3, if not all 3, would make it into it, even though they're also probably the movies I've watched the most as an adult.
okay. I'm going to start us then. I'm going to start us
Okay.
off, but
Number
in
3.
order, number 3.
Taking the hat off. Oh, I get it now, though.
Number 3, Fear and Loathing in Las Vegas. I can't, dude. Hunter S. Thompson is one of the coolest goddamn people to ever walk the face of this earth. He's so fun. He's so interesting. Shooting at his neighbor. Dude, he shot at his neighbor over a dispute over nothing, like literally nothing. His neighbor was like, guy, you can't be fucking playing music in the morning like this. And he goes, yeah, check this, pulls his revolver out, starts shooting at him. This is a real story. And Fear and Loathing in Las Vegas, I mean, if you haven't seen that movie, you absolutely must, because, man, this is backcountry, and that movie's insane.
Although, Adam, I don't think I've ever watched Fear and Loathing in Las Vegas start to finish. I've definitely seen the entire movie, and I've definitely started and watched parts of it multiple times, but I don't think in like one true start to finish. And I don't know, it's just like something to do with the styling of it and things like that. Where like, yeah, I don't know, just it's
I've never been disappointed in you, and this is a first. I'm actually
like I've enjoyed it, but I've just never like from roll credits to roll credits haven't watched
Holy
it.
fuck, dude. I ate a bunch of mushrooms once, and like on like the day after that, like kind of when you're just in that weird limbo state of just like your brain just doesn't function, threw that thing on, and I swear to God, that was how that movie was supposed to be ingested. So maybe try that out.
Nice. Yeah, I'll have to take that into consideration.
For
me, my number 3 would be The Godfather. And
okay.
honestly, I would like flip-flop at times between The Godfather and Godfather 2. Godfather 2 is just a little bit long. Actually, now that I'm talking out loud, I might even flip here right now, because like there is something about the 2 different parallel stories that get explored, but it's either Godfather or Godfather 2 for me for number 3. Actually, I guess speaking of movie franchises, the first 2 are amazing. I've never watched the third because I heard it was bad, and I didn't want to leave like a bad taste in my mouth. So
yeah, but
yeah.
Some of these things are predestined. I mean, you can't. How do you follow it up? Like, are you actually supposed to make? Even the fact that the sequel was good, I think, is like honestly, like we've won the lottery with that. We should have just stopped. We should have taken the money.
Although, again, I think you can make an argument from my perspective either way. Like both are just so fucking good in my opinion. But
they're good. But I don't push back a little bit here, Matt. I'm sorry. It's too fucking long. Like they could have
like some of my favorite movies are long. This one didn't make it into the list, but because there's parts of it that like are it's long. It's very long. I'm going to guess you've probably never watched it, but Once Upon a Time in America.
No.
And like it is so good. But it literally, like Godfather 2, it's got an intermission where it was designed, because I think it's like a 3.5 or maybe 3 3/4 of an hour long movie, and it's honestly so good. It's really in line with like Godfather-esque type cinema as well. But let's move on. Movie number 2 for you, Adam.
I'm torn here, but I'm going to go with a comedy, and I believe it would be Tropic Thunder. Most underrated comedy ever made. It is fucking hilarious. It is, honestly, I can watch that on repeat 100 times. I think I know every single line of the script. But Robert Downey Jr., Matthew McConaughey, who else is in there? Ben Stiller, Jack Black.
Yeah.
Man, the cast is tremendous. And let me tell you, this is before all this woke nonsense permeated our culture. And so, it's honestly it's so funny. Like Robert Downey Jr.'s in blackface, but it's hilarious, and they make fun of that in the film. It's a movie. I'm the dude playing the dude disguised as another dude, and you know, so they break the fourth wall a little bit with that, and at least you got to choose yours because the kid's retarded. Oh man, it is so funny and simple, Jack. Holy shit, I can't get over that film. But it was tied. Okay, so I'm tied there with another film that I can watch absolutely on repeat, and I do watch it every single year, which is Ace Ventura: Pet Detective. And while that sounds silly, obviously there are better films out there. Like if you're going to tell me, you know, if I'm going to say, you know, Ace Ventura is as good as The Godfather, like we're in deep water now. But Ace Ventura is so goddamn funny. Like just the aloofness, the way that Jim Carrey was able to make that experience so visceral. To me, that was quite brilliant. And in fact, that film was intended to be a serious film. Did you know that?
Sorry, Ace Ventura?
Ace Ventura was not meant to be a comedy. And Jim
Like
Carrey
originally, or
yeah.
like, because I can't imagine they cast Jim Carrey expecting it not to be a comedy.
No, so it was intended to be a serious film. As I understand it, it was intended to be legitimately a crime, like a movie about the crime that had happened. And then Jim Carrey got the script and was like, "Oh fuck, this could be hilarious," and then turned it into a comedy, and sort of developed that like crazy bubbly character.
Have you ever gone down the rabbit hole of watching, like, because I imagine you didn't watch it growing up, but In Living Color,
I've seen a couple.
It's fascinating because, like, again, just to see Jim Carrey really like grow into himself, and some of their skits are so relevant today. It's actually shocking,
Oh,
right? Like,
really?
yeah, because one is, I forget which actor, probably was one of the Wayans brothers, but like he's dressed up in drag, right? Going on a date with, I forget whether it's Jim or another Wayans brother, but it's really fun and funny, and it's shocking that some of those bits from the early '90s can be relevant in modern day society too.
Yeah, I mean things are cyclical, right? But yeah, I'll have to go back and watch some of that because I totally forgotten. But I do recall Jim Carrey's some of his outfits, like just the clothing style of I guess that's like 80s, 90s, right?
Hmm.
His clothes are hilarious in some of those clips.
Yeah. For myself, for my second favorite movie, this is very in alignment with Godfather and Godfather 2. And I actually see Al mentioned, uh, or no, sorry, Kyle mentioned Wall Street. That would honestly be like an honorable mention in my opinion as well. I think Wall Street's fantastic.
Wolf
And
of
maybe
Wall
has,
Street or Wall Street?
oh,
Because
sorry.
those are two different things.
Oh, I read. Yeah, I guess he said Wolf of Wall Street. I actually think Wall Street's better than Wolf of Wall Street, given the
Great film.
context of when they were made. Because like again, that idea like greed never sleeps, and I, I do kind of grade on a slight curve depending upon when a movie came out for context. I actually misread that. Wolf of Wall Street's great too, though. But for me, my number two favorite movie would be Goodfellas, and honestly, like it is just
Yeah.
it's almost a perfect movie in my opinion. And it like whenever I think about Goodfellas, it honestly feels like multiple movies in one. And there's something about the uh not the opening scene, but like the opening scene that gives the context of how he grew up and just talking about like ever since he can remember being young, he wanted to be a good fellow, right? He wanted to be connected. And that idea of like being somebody. And I think that that's like a recurring theme in a lot of the movies that I really enjoy that connect with me is that idea of like not exactly a chip on your shoulder, but like knowing you're capable of more and like wanting to be more than what you are today.
Yeah, I'm sensing a theme here, Matt. You're into mob movies.
Absolutely love them. Like honestly, they're so good. There's so many good mob movies too, in
y-
my opinion.
you
And
know
again,
what movie you're not going to bring up right now, but is actually really good, and we watched together as a team one time, is Arkansas.
yeah, no, Arkansas is fantastic. If it was older, I probably would classify it higher. But because it's a newer movie, and like with newer movies, you've got the benefit of kind of stealing and cribbing from other
Yeah,
movies. But I think Arkansas is criminally underrated. Like it honestly should embarrass everyone that hasn't seen Arkansas if you enjoy mob movies and things like that, because I feel like it's one of the most honest portrayals of it. And yet there's
yeah.
also, as you discussed with Saving Private Ryan, there are so many leadership lessons in it. And just like so good.
Yeah, big overtones of loyalty in that film that I really enjoy.
Mhm.
So I guess that brings us to number one.
Number one.
Do you want to lead us, or should I take care of it?
Sure. I'm happy to lead because I'm almost positive you could guess my number one. Do you want to guess my number one?
Well, no, because you've already gone through Godfather, so now I'm stuck.
Oh,
What is it?
really? I thought you would know it for sure. This is a movie that every time that we've moved into like one of the mansions, me and Peter would watch.
Excuse me. Let me take it from here. Fight Club. Okay.
Yes,
I'm
Fight Club.
sorry.
Probably the movie I've watched the most. And the way I was introduced it was one of the weirdest ways. So in my last year of university, I was in grade 12 biology, and we had a field trip to the East Coast to like study marine shit, right? Or whatever, but it really wasn't that. And we took a bus, and the teacher let the students pick what movie played on the bus. And there was like a 30, probably 20 something inch TV in one of the corners, and you could plug in your headphones or whatever and listen to it. And one of the kids brought up Fight Club, and it was like such a mind fuck to be watching it on a school trip.
Yeah.
And I didn't even understand it the first time I watched it, but then rewatched it once I got back home, and it's honestly been one of my favorite movies. I love the twist in regards to Fight Club. I think for when it was shot, right, if I remember correctly off the top of my head, it was 1999. I feel like a lot of it holds up today, and there's also some really fascinating social commentary on it, and it's so fun. I just absolutely love Fight Club.
Yeah, I mean, fuck, man. Brad Pitt in that film is so good, and Edward Norton too.
Well,
like he's just so good,
yeah,
so
like the
convincing.
acting is just insane, and like also like Brad Pitt just looks insane. I can remember, I forget his name now, but the guy that played Sawyer in Lost, he was doing like an interview, and someone was asking because like he's in very good physically shape, and he's like, it doesn't matter how good a shape you are in, you'll never be as good as Brad Pitt in Fight Club. And like that was just like a
Yeah.
quote that I found so hilarious and yet true, because again, this guy that's considered, very good looking at the time, top of the world with the TV show Lost, he still had a chip on his shoulder about how cut Brad Pitt was.
Yeah, so that's Josh Holloway is the guy you're looking for
Yes.
the
Yeah.
guy who played James Ford, or otherwise known as Sawyer in Lost,
Yeah.
which is a show that I never watched. I watched one episode of that show, and I was like, I'm out of here. There was like some sort of bear on the island or something. I was like, this is so fucking stupid.
The first
I
couple
can't.
seasons are so good. The last couple, obviously, mixed bag. But to me, it was appointment viewing throughout university. Was like literally like I it's sad. I don't even remember the night now, but I feel it was like Wednesdays or Thursday nights, and like it was literally fuck off. Do not bother me when Lost is airing. Like I will not answer the phone. I don't like. I can remember one time when the fire alarm was going off, and I was like, nope, this is not happening. I
Nope.
don't care if it's a real fire. I'm not missing a second of Lost.
That's hilarious, dude. I guess I certainly didn't have that experience. And when we were in university, Game of Thrones was coming out, and Sunday evenings, that was the thing. I mean, lockdown, couple of beers, maybe a euchre game, or 12, because the euchres come in 12s. And so, we would just absolutely buckle down. Nobody could have girls over, none of that shit. It was serious, no phones. It was fucking time for Game of Thrones, and that was the best. But that brings me to my favorite film.
I'm curious because I don't think I know it. So I'm excited. Had you asked me to like guess, I might have guessed Fear and Loathing, or like honestly, Wolf of Wall Street wouldn't be a shock for me either. But yeah, what's number one?
So I'm going to have to pick a different number one because we've already talked about it, but Saving Private Ryan is literally my favorite film of all time. It is so goddamn good. It is actually perfect. It is the perfect film, or one of the perfect films. And so I'll have to pick a second, of course. And
I actually did know Saving Private Ryan. For some reason, I thought you already mentioned it, but it's because we talked about it earlier, like not during the B section here.
But if I had to pick a second one, I'm going to throw it over to an absolute classic. And this film is so good, but I think the fact that it's so good and that it gets talked about so much, honestly, like brings it down, because everybody's like, oh yeah. And you're like, no, you just need to watch it and really digest how fucking good it is. And that's Pulp Fiction. Pulp Fiction.
Oh God, yes, yeah.
Is
Although The one thing,
Amazing.
one of the reasons it's not in my top 3 is it's so hard to watch, like, the rape scene or whatever you want to call it when they stumble into the spider's nest. Like,
Yeah, but
that honestly for me with the GIMP and stuff, like, again, great movie. Even that scene is great and all that, but, like, there's something about it that just, like, that feeling of helplessness
that's
and
the
being
point.
subjected to it, like, no, I get it, but, like, it just, like, it's honestly too much for me where, like, I wouldn't enjoy rewatching it ad nauseum, even though I've watched Pulp Fiction an insane amount of times.
Dude, there's something magical about that movie. I've watched it hundreds of times. I think, again, it's another movie where I know the whole script probably. But that scene, I actually don't know that actor's name, but the large black guy, he is so convincing because he's so broken in that scene, right? Afterwards, where he's just like, we're not talking about this.
Yeah.
And he has that moment where him and Bruce Willis just kind of like make eye contact and they just kind of understand. And he, he goes, I'm gonna call some pipe hitting
Yeah.
dudes and go rearrange this guy. And man, just like oh my God, I got chills again. But the raw emotion captured by those scenes is just so fantastic.
Mhm.
And one element of that movie that I still don't really get is Bruce Willis's like girlfriend, wife thing. Like when
Yeah.
they're in the hotel and she's talking about wanting a pot belly and like having blueberry pancakes and shit. Like it is just such a Tarantino is such a mind fuck. Like he will take you
Mhm.
through these emotions and these weird kind of feelings and thoughts and then throw that GIMP scene at you and you're like, what in the hell
It's
did I
such a
sign
roller
up for?
coaster. And, like, the scene with the watch and all that stuff, right?
Well,
Like, it
it's insane.
it's
Christopher
one of those
Walken.
movies that also feels like it's multiple movies in my opinion, right? Like,
Well,
it
the
actually,
timeline
like,
too.
yeah, for sure, but, like, there's just something like, there's so many and, like, the dancing, the heroin, like, oh my god, I'm probably gonna rewatch it this weekend now that you brought it
Yeah,
up. Um,
Jackrabbit Slims, baby.
but one thing I wanted to circle back to on the Saving Private Ryan, I feel like these 2 movies go, like, hand in hand, in my opinion, is Saving
Okay.
Private Ryan and Enemy at the Gates. Like,
Oh, dude, great
from, like,
movie.
the World War II genre of movies, they're just both so good. Like, different pacing and styling for the movies, but, yeah, absolutely love both of those, and obviously, Saving Private Ryan led into one of my favorite miniseries of all time, right? So, it's so good. So yeah, I
Dude,
very uncontroversial. I think we all like each other's movies, other than you thinking Godfather 2 is too long.
it's too long. I mean, can we just agree on that? Like it's too long for the pacing. Oh shit. Honorable mention though for like modern movies. And man, I feel like I could go all day on this stuff, but I'm actually really happy we have this kind of community more lighthearted segment here for Fridays. And I'm excited for next week. We're going to be talking about our favorite concert experiences, which is going to be super fun for everybody. But um honorable mention for a modern movie that I think absolutely nailed it was The Gentleman. That movie doesn't get talked
Yep.
about enough. So
Hmm.
underrated. That film is insanely good. And Guy Ritchie, I mean, he's a boss.
Hmm. Yeah, there's been some really good gangster movies come out recently as well. And honestly, even like Lock, Stock, and Two Smoking Barrel, and like all those movies are a ton of fun to explore. And I'm trying to think, what was the last Scorsese that came out on Netflix? It was really good, right? With
Oh yeah, yeah,
De Niro and stuff.
yeah.
Following the Jimmy Hoffa thing.
Let me just look this up real quick because that was a fantastic film. Um, oh shoot, this is gonna take a second here, but no, it was
Yeah.
really good. Oh fuck, dude, just look up Martin Scorsese's IMDb. Taxi Driver? Are you
Yeah,
kidding?
oh, The Irishman, that was
Oh,
it, yeah. That movie was
Goodfellas.
great too.
Yeah,
I feel like there's a couple little pieces of the pacing that weren't, perfect to me that, like, that's why it didn't, like, touch a movie like Godfather or, Goodfellas, but yeah, that was really good. I felt like that movie should have been worse, although, again, like, those actors are so old now that, like, it was
yeah.
fascinating to watch some of the fight scene, like, there's the one scene where I forget who it is, but he's beating up a guy on the street, and, like, you can tell just, like, the actor is, like, fragile from, the way that scene is shot.
Yeah. People criticize that one for being too long, and that's one where I actually don't think it was. I think it was actually well-timed and well-paced. And I'm actually a sucker for those like long, slow, drawn-out, character-heavy movies, despite my criticism of The Godfather, I guess. But yeah. Oh shit. I just Googled 90s movies, and I guess this is where we can perhaps wrap up the call. But man, did the 90s produce. I'm looking at The Matrix. I'm looking at Chain Reaction. Do you remember that freaking movie? Holy smokes.
No.
Jurassic Park, The Fifth Element,
Yeah.
dude.
Yeah, actually,
Armageddon,
The Fifth Element, I can rewatch that like an insane amount of times as well.
Gattaca.
But one movie I wanted to bring up, this is an old reference, and I guess you never watched it, but you should definitely check it out, or anyone that enjoyed my movie recommendations, especially like the gangster-oriented ones. A Martin Scorsese movie, one of his first ones was Mean Streets.
No,
And
never saw
I
it.
feel like it's slept on by a lot of people. Everyone remembers Taxi Driver, right, and Raging Bull. But this one came out before in 1973, and yet it still got Robert De Niro in it, and it's so good in my opinion. Again, the pacing's maybe not quite what other movies like Goodfellas would become, but it's very obvious, and it's just like a more realistic, watered down version of it. But like also love Scarface. That's a great movie too. That honestly is a very long movie, a big commitment. Casino's great. That's kind of also in that Scorsese series of movies that like about gangsters and shit like that.
Oh man, just because I've got it pulled up, and I know we're at risk here of going crazy because there's too many great movies. But The Truman Show, that was one that actually blew my mind. That one, I was
Honestly,
like,
Cable
oh,
Guy.
shit.
If we're going to be talking Jim Carrey, I feel like the Cable Guy is one that gets it's less popular now to shit on it, but way too many people back when it originally came out shit on it, said it like ruined Jim Carrey's career. And even back when it came out, like I really enjoyed it. It was definitely different, but yeah, in like honestly, I'd have to go rewatch it because it's been a while. But I feel like it's a perfect example of today's society where we're raised by television, right? We're raised by social media. The current generation is, and Jim Carrey was raised by cable and the Cable Guy.
Yep, I absolutely loved that movie as well. So I'm with you on that. But yeah, Matt, I really had fun today exploring
Yeah,
this.
I wasn't sure with just the two of us how this was going to turn out, but I definitely had a lot of fun. I know you did, and seems like we had decent engagement. I saw a handful of viewers watching throughout, so appreciate you guys hanging out with us while we talk about our favorite movies. If you'd like to share with us your favorite movies and you're watching this on a replay, jump into the Telegram group. I would love to hear what your guys' favorite movies are and what's your justification. Because again, I think there can be differences depending on how you frame the question, right? Is it the movie you could watch indefinitely if you're on Desert Island? It's the only movie that you would need versus like, oh, it's such a beautiful story or it's such an emotional reaction you get from the movie. There's a lot there to unpack, and it's just a fun conversation to have.
Yeah, absolutely, guys. Well, I hope you enjoyed this content. And again, links are in the description if you want to join that Telegram chat or go over to see our show notes on Substack. I don't think we had show notes today, but we've got our other shows posted there, whether you want to read up on sleep or learn about culture jamming. There's quite a bit of content there for you already. We're going to be coming back every single weekday with more new content. And reminder, guys, every day is kind of a new theme. So Monday, we're going to be kicking it back to entrepreneurial stuff, business, finance, professional development, that kind of thing. And that's where we're going to get the week started. So I hope everybody has a great Thanksgiving weekend, and we will see you back here on Monday as we have a huge week actually planned for content. I don't know, Matt, if you want to tease what is the Monday theme again? This is your show, Monday.
Monday is going to be one of my favorite business books of all time, The 4 Disciplines of Execution. Later on Wednesday, we're going to be jumping deep into The Fourth Turning and kind of exploring the How Straws book around it. I've recently just been listening to the audiobook. We'll also dip a little bit into their first book that came out before The Fourth Turning called Generations. And then Friday, we're going to be talking about concert experiences. And Adam, for Tuesday?
Yep. For Tuesday, I'm actually going to be talking to you guys about cell phones. Okay. Some of the pitfalls,
best practices.
Yep. So I think we're going to have a really interesting exploratory conversation with that. And obviously, probably everybody watching this has a cell phone. So this is something that affects all of us. So we're going to explore that topic. And then on Thursday, we're going to actually explore go bags. Maybe something you have, maybe something you've never thought about, but we're going to explore the topic and see why you should probably have one of these things, or maybe not. So we'll discuss some of the things that might go into a go bag, some purposes for why you might have a go bag, and dispel some rumors or some shade that's been thrown at the concept of prepping or having a go bag. So really excited for a full week of content, guys, and we'll see you back on Monday. Cheers.
Thanks, guys.
They say life is what you make it. So what happens if you actually try? What if you actually tried to get your mind right? What if you actually tried to live the high life? What if you happen to die cause life is finite? What if you actually tried to live your best day ever? What if you actually tried to get your mind right? What if you actually tried to live the high life? What if you happen to die cause life is finite? What if you actually tried to live your best day ever? What if you actually grind out when the time's right? What if you actually blinded by your hindsight? What if you actually find out what defines life? What if you actually tried to live your best day ever? I'm getting 1% better every day. I'm getting 1% better every way. I'm waking up every day to a sunny day. No matter what the weather say, life is like a record, so just let it play.